Esports is being pushed as the new hotness these days, and whenever something appears so popular, there is often a scramble for entities looking to take a short-term advantage. But what about the long term? As much as viewership numbers may seem striking, there are allegations over inflation and a general overvaluing of the industry. In fact, in some ways, esports is beginning to look more and more like a bubble that's about to burst. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Industry Report, the series where we take a closer look at some of the biggest happenings in the games industry. Now, before we get started, as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell to let YouTube know that you are enjoying the content. Of course, esports is far from new. It's actually been around for quite a while, but the increased commercialization of it these days, well, at least the latest wave of that, seems to be fairly new. The current popularity of esports illustrates a few different things: how it's easy to access live content these days, the extent to which popular games actually build a community, and then a shift in attitudes in people actually regarding televised gaming as a legitimate form of entertainment. Most importantly, though, it shows how lucrative the entire business model has been for those in control of it. And speaking of those in control of it, today we're going to be focusing on Activision Blizzard, because, well, Activision are doing the usual thing, shaking gaming by the ankles until all the money falls out, and, well, we're going to be looking at the rather strange esports outing that they've had through the lens of the Call of Duty League and the Overwatch League, both of which seem to be, well, fraught with issues, with the Overwatch League actually serving as the template for the Call of Duty League. Now, everything from the idea of franchising through the valuation of team slots and even the idea of enforcing regional structures, they've all been transplanted over from the Overwatch League to the new COD League. And it's very similar to the likes of NFL, and it is really weird seeing that traditional sports model be applied to esports when, in fact, they're so different. Now, for the first season of the Overwatch League, franchise spots went for around $20 million, and following the success of the opening season, the franchise fee actually rose between 30 and 60 million total, according to sources at ESPN. The first league of the COD season is going to adopt the same $25 million buy-in price, with 12 league spots being up for grabs. Now, the money-making success will no doubt have motivated Activision to pivot Call of Duty's esports into the same model as Overwatch. The OWL was expected to make $25 million in revenue in its inaugural season, but it actually received over $80 million, although $45 million of that is actually derived from an exclusivity agreement with Twitch, one that scuttlebutt sort of suggests Twitch have not been very happy about. Now, this deal was $45 million a year for 2 years, though it's not actually known whether the OWL received the $90 million payment up front, but certainly if Twitch were to drop from that, it would be a large financial hit. Now, this brings up an important point, that there is a vast gulf between the expected earnings of an esports enterprise and the actual earnings. Now, to illustrate this, a 2017 Morgan Stanley report, which was leaked to Kotaku, claimed that the OWL had the potential to generate $720 million in revenue. Now, for context, that's about the same amount of money as brought in by World Wrestling Entertainment. Frank Fields, Corsair's sponsorship manager, somebody really in the biz dev side of gaming, told an audience at San Francisco's Game Developers Conference, GDC, that he felt, quote, like esports is almost running a Ponzi scheme at this point, and that while many in the industry acknowledge that there is value in esports, it's not nearly on the level of value, quote, getting hyped these days. He concluded by saying that the current and future value of esports is, quote, optimistic at best and fraudulent at worst. So that certainly is a damning statement. Now, for some figures more specifically related to the Call of Duty League, Dextoro have handily reported on a leaked league deck. Now, though the league is due to kick off in 2020, we are still awaiting any kind of comprehensive overview of how it is expected to run. So right now we are relying on snippets of information like the Dextoro leak. Now, it confirms that the franchising cost for the opening season will be in and around the $20 million range, as we said earlier, but also they went on to say that they expect these slots to be worth over $45 million each in 10 years' time. Additionally, the league states that they want to expand to having 28 city-based teams, which is pretty insane. Now, the upfront investment has proven to be a major sticking point for some of the professional Call of Duty teams, and this is really where you see Activision basically just choke the esports scene. Activision obviously do believe that the league will be successful enough to warrant this $45 million price tag, but they're not doing a whole lot to actually convince a lot of the teams to buy in. As with many things, when it comes to handing out those franchise spots, Activision seem to be prioritizing making buckets of cash right now over ensuring the long-term health of the league and the quality of the competition therein. And indeed, one has to wonder if they're operating off all of these inflated revenue projections, whether their asking prices are even sensible. We've got teams like 100 Thieves, FaZe, Luminosity, and Gen G being 4 teams who will not be appearing in the COD League when it eventually gets rolling in 2020. Now, they are massive names in Call of Duty. 100 Thieves' absence is particularly striking, as they are one of the largest organizations in the professional Call of Duty scene, and they have an incredibly devoted fan base. In a video posted on Twitter, the founder and CEO of 100 Thieves, Matthew Hagg, aka Nadeshot, revealed that it would simply be too much for them to risk dropping $20 million on the entry fee and then the continued cost of actually running their team with the league. Additionally, the COD League's dogged determination to have the teams align themselves with real-world cities would pretty much have meant the end, effectively, of the 100 Thieves branding, which is a major asset to them as a company. This is another feature lifted wholesale from the Overwatch League and copied from traditional sports, but what Activision have failed to acknowledge here is that, unlike Overwatch, the Call of Duty esports scene is one that has existed for years, the teams already exist, they already have brands and fan bases, so trying to force this stuff is really basically suffocating that. The aforementioned teams were all fan favorites to some degree, with reputations and star players that would have brought in viewers, but instead they will not be participating in the COD League at all because of Activision's complete money-hungry refusal to negotiate with those teams for the good of the league. Notably, Gen G and Luminosity were denied franchise spots, giving credence to the idea that the $25 million buy-in fee was actually more of an auction starting price than a fixed cost. That really does further illustrate that Activision were focused on the short-term gains, not the long-term health. Now, an analyst for Newzoo, who oversees the revenue for 14 different esports teams, said that a majority of teams are operating at a loss. Now, he declined to clarify exactly by how much they're underperforming due to being under an NDA, but he did give us something, because when pressed whether the majority were closer to 51% or 90% of the teams operating at a loss, he said, if you looked into it, it's probably closer to 89% than 50%. So basically, the majority of esports teams are operating at a loss. This is certainly telling, although it should be noted that Newzoo's viewership numbers are believed by publishers to be unreliable, so the revenue estimates drawn for them may actually be off by quite a bit. Now, none of this, of course, matters for Activision as long as they can keep getting money thrown at them. When the Overwatch League, of course, was on the hunt for funding, they primarily targeted mainstream sports consortiums, but for the Call of Duty League, Activision have apparently expanded their focus to involve entertainment consortiums. In a recent live stream, esports journalist Richard Lewis actually speculated that consortiums like the one ran by boxer Floyd Mayweather may be just the kind to invest in the Call of Duty League, as would other sports stars and musicians, and this would, for Activision, play into the idea of legitimizing it as a mainstream form of entertainment, a bit more like the NFL, which is more what they want for the Call of Duty League, as it would work pretty darn well with the pre-existing mass market appeal of the Call of Duty franchise, which, yeah, just about everybody knows about. Because of this, there's a chance for the COD League to completely outperform the OWL in pretty much all aspects of its viewership because of the strength of that franchise's brand recognition, and I'd maybe say sort of normie appeal. Really, more people know about Call of Duty than Overwatch, I would say, but it definitely seems like this is all hedged on expectations of growth that just are not going to pan out. I mean, even dropping the analysis thing for a second, I really think that a lot of us just even, watching Twitch, it just does feel like the money couldn't make sense when you watch so many of these events, and more we're seeing leaks, we're seeing industry insiders pretty much say that is the case. So one has to wonder, is this going to burst for Activision, and are Activision actually exposing themselves to more risk than anyone else by being so short-term money hungry and by really pushing those expectations of long-term growth that really do seem quite absurd? Going back to Richard's take, speaking about the Overwatch League, Richard Lewis stated that every success Blizzard enjoyed with the OWL pretty much happened by accident. He emphasizes that we've never seen seen an esport succeed, where its entire creation has been forced, and elaborates that things were just not allowed to develop organically through authentic engagement. That's not what happened with Overwatch, as Lewis outlined, rather than basically addressing the many issues that were preventing Overwatch from actually organically being an accessible esport. Activision Blizzard instead pretty much just opted to compile the Morgan Stanley document that I mentioned earlier. Now, I'll say this from what I've heard, wink wink, nudge nudge, I feel very confident about this. I can confirm a lot of that to be the case. I pretty much know that Blizzard have been very slow to develop a lot of features for the Overwatch League, and I know that they purposefully pretty much strangled the grassroots scene. There's a whole big thing involving a Korean league that they pretty much killed, and a lot of this was just their drive for complete control of the ecosystem. And when you look at just how top to bottom the monetization of the Overwatch League is, you really do just see it's greed over competition. They don't care about the quality of gameplay. The whole thing, just to me, seems like such an obvious money-spinning operation. Now, I will at least admit my own biases. That comes from being old school StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, when those things were actually growing organically. And let me tell you, they felt very different to how the modern Activision Blizzard esports scenes do. Now, going back to that Morgan Stanley document compiled using information and metrics related to the genuinely successful esports like League of Legends and CSGO that, grew over time in a natural fashion rather than just being bootstrapped with growth expectations, well, that was used by Activision Blizzard to essentially dupe venture capitalists. Now, Lewis likens the VCs to, gamblers. They're placing their bets as, educated bets as they can, of course, on different tables, knowing that, at least some of them will actually come through. And he states that because these people have the money to play around with, because basically the risk profiles can make sense for them, they feel safe making the investment. And this is what's kind of dangerous about bubble industries. The money, the people, the resources, they get committed, and when it collapses, it's all lost. If you want to look at something like this from another sector, just look at the profitability of WeWork, look at the amount of money that SoftBank has put into WeWork, look at how the WeWork CEO has pretty much just sold off like 700 million of stock and is pretty much out of there. And that's kind of another example of this bubble company propped up by crazy growth expectations when a lot of the fundamentals, such as their profitability, just do not add up. So WeWork's maybe not it's not a one-to-one comparison with esports, but there's a lot of similar fundamentals regarding things like profitability and just the idea of a bubble where everyone's pretty much agreed this thing is super high value, even though when you actually look into the numbers, you're like, hang on a second, maybe it's actually not. Now, this duping behavior, the inflation of growth expectations, continues to be seen across the esports industry, and you only have to look at the numerous stories involving inflated Twitch views to get a sense of just the amount of asterisks that you need to put next to a viewership count. There's a distinct lack of transparency when it comes to how Twitch viewership is tracked, and remember, the viewership numbers are precisely what companies like Activision Blizzard, it's what they use when they're appealing to sponsors and justifying exorbitant franchise fees. Now, Cecilia D'Anastasio, writing for Kotaku, pursued an investigation involving Twitch streams being embedded in lieu of adverts at the bottom of every page in Gamepedia, which itself is actually owned by Twitch through its subsidiary Curse. Now, this facilitates, something amounting to views by proxy, which, would do nothing more than just artificially inflate Twitch viewership numbers. Now, Activision Blizzard themselves employed this method for the OWL playoffs, Twitch streams which, according to esports consultant Slasher, were autoplay embedded on the front page and within articles of Vox media sites, such as Polygon, The Verge, SB Nation, and Eater. Now, Slasher maintains that those Twitch embeds don't actually generate views on Twitch, but that is contradicted by D'Anastasio's research. There are other things that I've seen, like Slasher, commonly retweet about viewership inflation, so it clearly is an issue in the esports sector. Now, what is clear, though, is just how unclear viewership numbers tend to be. Cecilia writes that the mainstream narrative of esports has been lovingly crafted by those who benefit from its success, and that does seem to be the case. The problem for Activision Blizzard is that going forward, they've pretty much intrinsically misunderstood what makes esports successful. The major advantage of esports is that they're global, but the OWL and COD League's insistence on on being regional is just more evidence they don't really understand what they're trying to promote. They're not doing a good job of just embracing how these things could naturally form themselves. This is then, of course, further reinforced by their lack of support for grassroots esports, which is insane considering, like, just how successful it was for StarCraft 1, which filled stadiums in South Korea, and, StarCraft 2, which is pretty much my personal favorite game ever. To give an example, the OWL will introduce home matches for its coming season, but for the last 2 seasons, US fans have been watching a US-based team named after the UK city of London, consisting entirely of Korean players. It's clear that they're basically forcing this regional franchise thing just into a place where it really doesn't make that much sense. But of course, I would say that given the similarities to an established successful format like, say, the, like American football, you can see how that could be used to get investors on board. Of course, then the difference between a brand like London Spitfire and 100 Thieves is that Spitfire are region locked, while 100 Thieves enjoy a potentially global appeal that Activision should be trying to harness rather than quash. It's true that franchising can be good for business, right, as it does, sort of give a brand a chance to build a presence and stick around for a while, but this just doesn't really apply to the Call of Duty League, as its biggest teams are already established brands, whereas of course for the OWL, the teams were created just for the league. It just all goes together to show how short-sighted Activision Blizzard's plans have been overall, and especially seemingly for the COD League. The plan appears to just be to drum up crazy amounts of investment from entertainment organizations with as broad a market appeal as possible in order to ensure as big of like an inward cash flow as they can, while, relying on the name recognition associated with the Call of Duty brand to bring in the viewers. And of course, all of this is while requiring hefty buy-in fees from its franchisees and then imposing, branding restrictions that really do keep the teams tethered to Activision Blizzard. A lot more so than, say, 100 Thieves would actually be. So it's a very strange situation. It's all hedged in this 10-year growth, bet for the valuation of a franchise spot. And on that growth, well, I think it'll be forced. I think it'll be accidental. I don't think it will be like organic and engagement driven. I don't think Activision have their sights on building a sustainable league with quality competition being the number one goal, one that will appeal to fans and players alike. I mean, it's just so obvious given how much they have blundered their way through both Call of Duty and Overwatch. And I mean, there's even scuttlebutt going around that after year 1 of Overwatch, the team leaders were not particularly happy with the revenue that came out of it. So basically, it's just esports bubbles. It really seems like it's a large problem, and for me it's really sad because the newer wave of esports, like when StarCraft 2 came out, there was the beta competitions, and the time when StarCraft 2, like around 2010, 2011, when it was basically the top dog, it was like really at least right up there with LoL and the rest of them. That was a really great time. You had so many different competitions ran by so many different organizations. It was pretty decentralized. You were following the players because the players were really good. They had interesting brands, whatever, and it was just a natural sort of competition. And then you look at the Overwatch League, trying to be so slick, and really, I think just having no texture, no interest, it feels so forced, so corporate, so neutered, that, it's turned me from somebody who used to spend a lot of time following esports, really being in depth in esports, to now I just see the corporate, like, sanitized, terrible thing that OWL and Co have become, and I just kind of want to get out of there. At least, I don't know, for me, like, the FGC and some of StarCraft 2 kind of still remains as like a bastion of community-driven stuff, and there's just a lot of other stuff out there with other games. I was even looking into Age of Empires esports, which is pretty cool, but, a lot of those things, they're really fun, they have passion, they're organic, and then you just see what Blizzard do with Overwatch, and you see what they're trying to do with Call of Duty, and it's just a little bit sad, I guess, that the monies came in and taken away, I think, what made it special in the first place. But anyway, there you go. That is a lot of my opinion, but also a lot of sourcing, just a lot more from around the industry, and just the sort of critical counterpoints to what we're hearing with, to what we're hearing with esports, kind of going against the narrative that the companies are trying to push. I think, as always, you're always going to see big expectations of growth, using that to get more funding in, and a lot of the time, it's going to be a bubble, and I think this may just be one of them. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what your thoughts are about esports in the modern day, and with that, I will see you next time.